Hello, everyone. Today on The Final Bar, I am not your host. We have a special treat for you. Guest host Joe Rabil, founder of Rabil Stock Research, is going to be talking you through the markets today, giving you some of the charts are top of mind for him. Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Final Bar.
Hi, welcome to The Final Bar. I'm your guest host for today, Joe Rabil from Rabil Stock Research. Big fan of the show, so I was very happy when Dave asked me to fill in when he was on vacation. We're going to start things off with a poll. This poll today was, where is the S&P 500 index 1 month from today? And if you notice what's interesting to me, it's sort of split. I mean, the winner was down between 0 and 10%. But if you look at and you add the pluses and the minuses, it's basically 51 to 49 people thinking it's going to be down versus going to be up. I think I would probably fall in the camp of 0 to 10% higher. And my reasoning has to do with momentum. The momentum of the market continues to confirm. We're continuing to see a broadening effect. And typically, you'll get a sign that the momentum is slowing a little bit first before we get some kind of a big drop. So I'm leaning more towards this carrying a little bit higher. It might pull back in between now and a month from now, but I think the momentum is on our side. We're going to go ahead and get going with the market recap now. And I wanted to make sure you guys know, so I'm a ACP user. And so I'm going to do this in ACP, and I'm do this on a regular basis when I'm want to see what's going on with the market. I find it to be incredibly helpful. So I want to just start out with this market summary page at the top, this little heat map, essentially, that's telling us what's taking place is it large cap growth winning, or is it small cap value, or something in between? And today it was clearly small cap value from the beginning of the day, all through the Fed announcement. And I'm going to get into the Fed announcement. Very big news today. Obviously, something that was expected because the market didn't react too great. I think that Fed has done a really good job of letting people know what they're thinking. So not a big surprise today. But I thought it was interesting when I looked at this map before the Fed and after the Fed, obviously a little bit more positive at the end of the day than it was before the Fed news. But it was still slanted towards small cap value. And I think that goes to what's taking place with the broadening effect of the market. We're getting some of these large cap, mega cap stocks taking a breather in some cases, and large cap growth, sort of pulling in or taking a little bit of time off from a leadership role. And we're seeing other areas start to click in. So I did want to take a minute before I get into the indices and just mention a few things about the Fed. So they're still saying there's a lot of uncertainty. I'm going to read a few things here. Uncertainty about the outlook for the next meeting, let alone the next year. They aren't really forecasting a recession anymore. They're not looking to be cut. They're not expecting to cut rates this year. I think that's a big thing. People still kind of teeter-tottering on whether they're expecting that to happen. The Fed's basically saying that's not going to happen this year. But they did say that they don't see inflation back at 2% until 2025. So as I said, what I wanted to bring up a couple points that came across today, but if you see what the market did, and we're going to go through a few of these indices, but this was pretty tame. This is not really violent price action. And one thing I've been noticing about the Fed days is they used to have a lot of volatility around it because people weren't really sure what to expect. But it seems like they're giving a lot of advance notice on what they're thinking. And I think it's a good thing, keeps the market a little bit more stable when they do make these announcements. So let's just take a peek at this Dow Jones, because this is up for the 13th day in a row, I believe. And I think the most important takeaway is this the beginning of the move, or is this an end of the move? When you see this sort of long string of movement take place, are we at the end of a run or the beginning of a run? And I'm viewing it as more the beginning of something rather than the end. And the reason is it's at a breakout point. It's normally happening at an igniting point in the market rather than after an extended move. The market makes an extended move, and then you get 13 days in a row. That to me is more of climax. This is more of a starting move. And it was the leader today. In fact, it was the only of the major three indexes that was up. S&P was down a fraction, and the NASDAQ was down 12 basis points. Again, New York Stock Exchange composite up today, a little bit more broadening. You can see the S&P 600 was really the best of these indices, as was mentioned earlier, with the small cap up 68 basis points. Still seeing the NASDAQ 100 going through a little bit of a pullback after a nice long run. So I think this is healthy so far. The good news is we're seeing the broadening effect, but we're not seeing a significant amount of damage being done to the leaders, the stocks that have been the leaders. And I would put those in the tech area, consumer discretionary, as well as some industrials. Let's go ahead and look at what the bonds did today. And I'm going to focus on this 10-year, and we'll just scroll out a little bit. I mean, it's not surprising to me. We had a huge run in rates, and they've gone sideways. Now, the longer bias, in my opinion, is still to the upside as long as we stay above these levels down here around 3.25. But it just doesn't seem all that likely to expect some kind of a huge charge to break out and break above this prior peak that was made late last year. So I'm inclined to think this wants to continue to kind of work sideways, and today's action fits in line with that. Is it possible that we just peaked up over 4 and we're going to work our way down maybe a little bit lower? I mean, that's certainly in the potentially in the cards, but I'm more focused on that bigger sideways range that's in place. Short-term rates continue to have a little bit more upward pressure to them. Let's look at the dollar, which had a down day. And we're going to go into some commodities looking at gold and silver. So this will have an effect on that. We made a pretty big move to the downside, and we've been sort of channeling. There's a lot of support underneath current levels for the dollar, but I think the pullback was a little too strong, probably, again, forming some kind of a trading range. So let's go ahead and move on into the gold area. On the commodity areas, looking at gold to start. I really like the look of this, and I'm actually going to spread this out for a second. We've got, I'm going to pull up the monthly chart because we've got, let me switch this to gold. So we've got this really nice, huge move to the upside that ended in 2020, and then a sideways pattern I think looks very healthy when I look at gold. I think this pattern has a significant amount of support underneath, and the odds are that this is ultimately going to break out. If we look at the weekly chart, we had sort of a deep pullback, but I think we still have the potential to get ourselves to get through this area. What's possible is we're going to move up and then come back down and then maybe make a charge and try and break out. So something to be on the lookout for. But it was a positive day for gold, and silver even had a better day, up pretty big, trying to play a little catch up to gold from that standpoint. One of the other areas in the commodities that I wanted to talk about briefly was copper. I've noticed some improvement in the copper stocks, and I'm going to look at the monthly chart really briefly because we've got this MACD pattern where it's coming down to the zero line and starting to cup around. And I think that's a very interesting setup, especially when we're looking at it from a monthly standpoint. Big move to the downside, a big bounce off support, rally up, and now we've pulled back, but we're finding a lot of support here, and it doesn't look like a significant amount of selling pressure when I look at the ADX. If we switch it to the weekly chart, we've got the same pattern. We've got a zero line reversal pattern developing where we came down and corrected and now turning back to the upside. So I think this is an area to be on the lookout for, especially just based on what's taken place in some of the individual stocks. Like to see this break out a little bit stronger, maybe get through 24.5 or even 25 to get a little bit more convincing. But I'm very encouraged by the look of this pattern here. Okay, let's switch over to the cryptos real quick before I move into the sectors. Bitcoin Bitcoin's at a very critical point, in my opinion. We've come back below the 30,000 mark, which I think is key. Obviously, big round number, but we also have this support level about 28,500. I think if we hold that and turn back up 30,000, that's very, very bullish. I think if we actually break down through the 28.5 level, that we've lost some short-term momentum and we could end up forming some kind of a range. So something to be on the lookout for, but it did have a decent day today with the Fed and all. And again, look at what's taken place. We've got the MACD, which worked off the overbought, right, by coming back down towards the zero line. And we still have pretty good strength based on the ADX. In the second segment today, I'm going to go deeply into ADX, and I am going to cover the S&P in depth as well, based on the ADX and what's taking place. Let's go ahead and take a peek at a few of the indexes. So the transports had a huge day today. UMP gapped up significantly on, they hired a new CEO. So we're getting a huge move in that. But I would take a look at a stock like CP breaking out of a big base. I think that's very intriguing based on what's taking place. And I did a review of all the industrials this morning. I was actually really impressed with some of the new rotation that's taking place. What's funny is when you look at the transports, it really started out with the airlines. The airlines just came out of the gates and just took off, pardon the pun. But we've got some other areas in the transport starting to creep higher, starting to work higher. The rails and the trucking starting to show some signs of improvement. And then just looking at the NDX, as I mentioned before, and we can see this going back. This move started way back here in February when the ADX really started to kick into gear this year. All right. And when ADX crosses above 25, we know we've got a potential trending environment. And through these corrections, we never got the sellers to take over. I think that's an encouraging sign for this. Now, the negative is it looks like it's starting to run out of a little gas. We've lost a little bit of momentum based on the MACD. So maybe this wants to take a little bit of a breather. The good news is it doesn't look all that violent so far. And the other big positive in this is, again, we're seeing other things rotate up and improve. Okay, let's take a quick peek at the sectors because I've got these sorted. So you can do these anyway. I usually keep them by symbol so I know exactly where each one of these are. But for today, I'd like to see what's winning and what's losing. It was kind of evenly split today. XLU was basically a break even. XLC had a big day based on Google's news, had earnings beat, and XLK is down based on what happened to Microsoft today, where they maybe forecasted a little lower. So other than that, we've got a few just spots just to kind of watch. I would keep an eye on this. Let me pull back. Yeah. The XLV is what I wanted to look at really briefly. This little breakout here showing signs of improvement after a low ADX condition, some volume improvement. I'd be hunting in areas inside of the healthcare area. I would definitely be watching in the energy area, which is starting to move up, starting to break out. We're starting to see buyers moving up. I've seen a lot of improvement in some of the energy stocks being led by the drillers and equipment services. And then finally, I do like the action in the materials overall, and we're starting to see some improvement from that standpoint. So that's our market wrap for today.
Hey, thanks so much for that market update. Couple quick comments before we continue today's show. First off, we welcome your questions. I'm going to be back soon, and I would love to answer your question in our next mailbag segment. You can reach us via email, thefinalbar@stockcharts.com. On Twitter, just tag us in a comment @FinalBarSCTV. And on our YouTube channel, just drop a comment below the video that you're watching. We'd love to hear from you, especially your feedback on the show, but definitely your questions. We'd love to answer your question live on the air in our next mailbag segment. Also, we have a pretty serious special happening right now at StockCharts.com. If you have never been a premium paid member of StockCharts, now is the time to do it. We have a flash sale going on in the month of July. You can go to StockCharts.com/special. Some of the most powerful features of the StockCharts platform are reserved for our paid members. Things like our scanning engine, which allows you to identify stocks and ETFs on the move. our chart list feature, which really allows you to capture the names and the charts that are most important to you, and our ACP platform, our advanced charting solutions, which really is a dynamic way of understanding market dynamics. You can go to stockcharts.com/special for all the information on that summer sale happening in the month of July. And now back to your guest host, Joe Rabil of Rabil Stock Research.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about ADX today, and I wanted to apply it to some of the things that have been taking place this year, late last year, early this year, that I think can help you if you're on the lookout for it and can be aware of it. So I'm going to start out, and I want to look at the XLF. Now, one of the things I love about ACP is the ability to look at all 4 timeframes at once. And you get a real good feel for what's taking place in each time frame. Now, I use the exact same indicators on every single time frame. It gives me a real good feel for what's taking place and what areas are showing real strength. If you notice recently, we are showing some significant improvement in the financials. I didn't mention that in the recap, but it has made a really nice move here over the last month. But what I wanted to zero in on is on the weekly chart and how the ADX can be of great use, in my belief. So as we look back at 2021 and the move that it made to the upside, we can see the strength at the ADX line. This blue line is the ADX line. And I'm going to give you a real brief, just quick review. So the green line represents the strength of the buyers. The red line represents the strength of the sellers. And the blue line is really the difference between the two. It doesn't really care whether the buyers are winning or the sellers are winning. It's going to go up if these lines start to separate. But if you go back to 2021, when we made this big move to the upside, the buyers were clearly in charge and the blue line made a big move. Now we go through pullbacks along the way and consolidations and then go to a new high here. But notice how the ADX just completely died off. We did not get confirmation. And I think it's very important to understand, once you have a trend in place that's confirmed by ADX, and then it goes through some kind of a consolidation, tries to go to a new high, and we don't get confirmation, you should be on the lookout for a reversal. And a reversal is more than your standard divergence. Divergence, a lot of times, this means pullback. I'm more in line of thinking that the 18 is going to cross down below the 40, and we're going to get a trend shift on that time frame. So it's something to really it'll give you an early warning sign. I'm going to give you a few more examples of this, but then notice how we made a drop to the downside. We got a strong reading by the sellers based on the red DI, right? The sellers are in charge on this decline. And then we get a rally up, and then we come back down and make a minor new low. MACD does not confirm, right? There's divergence there, but look at what the ADX is saying. This is a lot more important to me than what the MACD is telling me. MACD could just mean a rally, but this is telling me be on the lookout for a reversal of the trend. Now, it's taken a little while to really get things reversed, but it does look like it's heading in that direction. So I just think this is one key to ADX that I want you to take away from this is when you have an existing trend in place, you monitor the ADX. As long as the ADX is making peaks above the 25 line, this horizontal line, then you should expect continuation to the upside. The moment you make a new high, a new significant high in the market, and the ADX does not confirm by getting above 25, then we probably want to be on the lookout for some kind of a reversal. We certainly want to tighten up stops if we're in a stock that does that, and potentially just take some profits. Let's go ahead and look at a few other examples. So let's look at this stock. This is a stock that I've highlighted recently. I wanted to bring up another, I think, real important key to ADX, and that is if we go through an extended period where the ADX stays below 25, if you notice this blue line stayed below through this whole period, May, on a daily chart, it stayed May, it stayed in June, and it was about a little over 2 months, which is a long time for a daily chart to have a low ADX period like that. What you want to go when you see this taking place, you want to be on the lookout for a sideways pattern or some kind of a pattern to develop. It can form in the form of a triangle. It could also form an ascending triangle. A lot of times my favorite is just this horizontal pattern where we're just bouncing along in a sideways line. The quieter, the better. And once we break out of that, you should expect upside movement. And when the ADX confirms to the upside, look at the volume pattern. We should be expecting a trending move starting. As long as the ADX continues to make peaks here above the 25, I prefer probably above 30, then we know that we should expect continuation on a pullback. So I'm expecting continuation on this pause or this pullback based on the strength here. You can also see the volume pattern confirming, not a lot of sellers coming in here. So that's one thing we really want to be on the lookout for. Let's look at this. Now, I'm only pointing out a couple of stocks that I've highlighted recently in my reports, but look at this drop. So you see how this made this move to the downside, and look at how the ADX was strong here. This is confirming action during this legs to the downside. And then we get a rally up, we make a new low, and this is really not confirming. It just barely gets over 25. You should be on the lookout for some kind of a reversal pattern. And I'm saying now, I think the trend is completely reversed. But you'd have this kind of early warning sign. ADX gets a bad rap for being a lagging indicator, and it can be a lagging indicator if I'm looking at it from the hard right edge, if I'm looking at it right now. But if you know what you're looking for, you can anticipate these signals, and it can be a huge advantage. So when it comes to a low ADX pattern, you draw trend lines on price and wait for a breakout. And if you do that, I think you'll have a big lead ahead of the crowd. At least you'll be prepared. Look at this low ADX breakout pattern. And I'm trying to just stay focused on these two things with ADX. We go sideways, we get this sideways line. Look at this extended long period where the ADX is low, and then we break out from that and we see upside continuation. Now we're looking for a sign where the ADX is kind of dying out. But until that happens, you sort of assume continuation to the upside. Let's look at one other point here. Look at the monthly chart of the same stock, SKT. So you get a move to the upside with confirming evidence here, and then we make this peak in 2015, and ADX is nowhere to be found. It's down in the teens. So we should be on the lookout for some kind of reversal. Now, the reversal actually took a long time. This is a monthly chart. It took a long time to actually completely reverse things, but it did have a pretty serious correction from 40 to 30 off of that signal. And then it actually had one gasp move to the upside, failed new high, failed ADX reading, and then we get a big decline to the downside. So I think this indicator, if you're watching it and if you're alert to it, can be extremely helpful. Let's give you a couple more examples. Look at something like CRM. The move to the downside takes place, and we get confirmation with strong ADX reading. Then it rallies up and comes down here. Now, it wasn't necessarily the best timing tool, right? Because it stayed down there for the fourth quarter, but you knew it was getting late in this trend. It was telling you there wasn't a lot of strength. So this is the type of stuff that I'm using with my institutional clients that I know are longer term players. And I'm using it on a monthly and a weekly, but you can always do this on shorter term time frames. The same patterns take place if you're looking to do trading signals. So when you have this sort of heads up like that, you can go down to the smaller time frame, go down to a daily chart during that period, and look for the sign where ADX is starting to kick in. Look at the buyers stepping in for the first this is the first time during this whole period. Start of the year, boom, we get a higher low and strong ADX crossing above 25. And we've actually had a period here. This here was not confirmed by ADX. It ended up going sideways. Now it's trying to move again, but I think this is getting late. I actually do think this stock is getting late. Just one more example. I want to go through another topping pattern. ADX does not confirm here in UNH in 2022, and we've been and still paying the price for that from that standpoint. Now, let me just take a couple minutes because I want to talk about ADX in multiple timeframes and how it usually works. Now, this works even if you're talking about trend. The same thing holds true what I'm going to talk to you about today, and that is when momentum gets going, it's going to start on the smallest time frame first, and then it's going to expand to the larger time frames. So right now, if I go to the hourly chart and I scroll back, I'm going to show you how things started to get going here really in June, where we broke out of this area. ADX started to kick in, and this was really right around June. We had a lot of confirmation that the ADX was very strong on the hourly chart. Now, when I see strength on this time frame, I want to see it spill over into the next time frame. The next time frame is a daily. And if you notice what happened here, right about a week or two later, it spilled over onto the daily chart, and the ADX started to climb above 25 after being low for an extended period of time. And I think that's a really good confirmation that now we have confirming momentum on the daily chart. And then we go and look at what took place. So can this stay strong enough and the ADX strong enough to get the weekly chart to do the same thing? And look at what happened here in right about the end of June, early July. We started to see confirmation on the higher time frame, the weekly chart. And if it keeps going, we'll end up getting more confirmation on the monthly chart. So what I want to point out is that we can use the multiple time frames to help us get in early in the trend. Even when this is showing a low ADX condition, we can go and find the strength on the lower time frame and get on board a little bit earlier. So I would use these tools. Now, the one point I want to make is because the ADX is still in pretty good shape on the daily chart, I'm not necessarily looking for some kind of a big drop yet. We have some room to pull back, but I don't know that I'd be looking for a reversal because we don't really have any sign of that taking place yet. Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today. Before we get going, I just want to make mention, my show comes out on Thursdays called Stock Talk. I do a lot of what you saw on the end of the segment. I go into price, trend, and momentum in multiple time frames. And then I do a lot of stock reviews. People can send in their symbols for that. So if you have an interest, you can take a look. Also, my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. One thing I would encourage you, if the segment, the educational segment interested you, you could take a look at my book. I'm offering it right now at a discount on PDF. If you go to rabilstockresearch.com/book, you can sign up there or download the book there. Okay, well, I've really enjoyed hosting the show. I appreciate Dave having me on. He'll be back next week. I hope everyone has a great trading day, and we'll see you next time.